She called him Dad, not once, not as a slip of the tongue. She called him Dad, looked him in the eye, or at least spoke into his ear through a phone, and told him she would never do anything to hurt his son.
As George was missing, I reached out to the defendant and spoke with her. She told me, she said, Dad, I would never do anything to hurt George. She called me Dad, knowing that my son was floating in the river somewhere with his body just decomposing, knowing that he had been hog-tied, wrapped in a sheet, drove an hour and 15 minutes away, and thrown in the water like he was just garbage and trash. And just to concur with Candy said, he wasn't trash. He was a son. He was a father. He was a nephew. He was a brother. He was a friend. He was a lot of things. May not have been perfect, but who is? But he definitely didn't deserve to die like that.
It begins with a phone call. A lie delivered so smoothly, so calmly, so convincingly that a grieving father had no reason not to believe it. A lie that bought her months. A lie that made an already devastating loss somehow worse. But the truth always comes out. Before we go any further, if you're new here, this is Brian Crime TV, where we cover real cases, real people, and real consequences. If this kind of storytelling matters to you, take a second right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know, and make sure you never miss a case. Now, let's get into it. His name was George Cox Jr. Everyone who loved him called him June. He was 32 years old, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. His birthday was October 6th, just 13 days before everything in this story began. He stood 5 feet 6 inches tall. He had a daughter named Gianna, who was 8 years old at the time all of this happened, and by every account from the people who knew him best, being present for that little girl mattered to him in a way that shaped how he moved through his days. He was not described as a perfect man. His own father acknowledged that in a courtroom, in front of a judge, with the woman who killed him sitting right there. Nobody who loved George stood up and pretended he was without flaws. They didn't need to. Because the point was never that he was perfect. The point was that he was human and he was theirs, and he did not deserve what happened to him. His aunt, Chaplain Candace Amos, spoke about him at the sentencing hearing.
I remember one holiday particularly, when he was a young child. He and his mother and his siblings spent Christmas Eve night at my house. We played games, watched Christmas movies, and had so much fun, Your Honor. Then early Christmas morning, we rose around 5 a.m., sat in our PJs around the Christmas tree, opening gifts and sipping hot chocolate and coffee. When June helped to prepare, and we also had pancakes that June helped to prepare, and this was the first time he had made pancakes from scratch. I remember the look in his young eyes, realizing that he could create something from scratch, and they would taste so delicious. He was so proud, and after that I called him the Pancake King because he never wanted to use pancakes from a box again.
As George was missing, I reached out to the defendant and spoke with her. She told me, she said, Dad, I would never do anything to hurt George. She called me Dad, knowing that my son was floating in the river somewhere with his body just decomposing, knowing that he had been hog-tied, wrapped in a sheet, drove an hour and 15 minutes away, and thrown in the water like he was just garbage and trash. And just to concur with Candy said, he wasn't trash. He was a son. He was a father. He was a nephew. He was a brother. He was a friend. He was a lot of things. May not have been perfect, but who is? But he definitely didn't deserve to die like that.
2 years old at the time of these events. She and George were in a relationship, one that, by her own words delivered directly to the court, had its good moments and its bad ones. She described it as up and down, not always perfect. She also described herself in that same courtroom as a loving and caring person. Someone who would not hurt anyone for no reason.
I am a person that is a loving and caring person. And one thing about me, I'm not a person that's going to hurt you.
But the court also heard everything else. What investigators eventually uncovered was that while Diamond was in a relationship with George, she was simultaneously involved with another man, a 41-year-old named Emmanuel McQueen Jr. George had his apartment on Bosworth Avenue in Cleveland. Diamond had her own place she could go to. And according to what emerged through the investigation, she was moving between two relationships while George remained part of her life. None of that, on its own, is a crime. But it is context. And in true crime, context is everything. George Cox Sr. lived in Farmington Hills, Michigan. He and his son George Jr. did something a lot of families talk about, but not everyone actually does. They shared their locations with each other. Not occasionally, consistently. They stayed in close contact that way, each of them knowing where the other was in real time. It was the kind of arrangement that speaks to a relationship built on genuine closeness, a father and son who wanted to be reachable to each other, who wanted to know the other was okay. The last time George Sr. heard from his son was October 17, 2024. George Jr. called him that day. He had a question about a family situation, wanted to talk it through, wanted to know if he was handling things the right way. They spoke. George Sr. listened. He gave his son guidance, the way fathers do, and then he told him to call back later. He did not call back. By October 19th, the family could not reach George at all. His phone went unanswered. His location, the one they had always shared, went dark in a way that didn't feel right. George Sr. knew something was wrong. He made the drive from Farmington Hills to Cleveland and went directly to the Bosworth Avenue apartment. What he found was an apartment that had been completely emptied out and cleaned. No George. No sign of where he had gone, but there were marks on the floor, the kind of marks that suggest someone had attempted to scrub something away. George Sr. contacted Cleveland police. Detective Kevin Callahan and his team responded to the scene. They deployed luminol, a chemical used to detect the presence of blood that is otherwise invisible to the naked eye. The results were not subtle. The luminol reacted across the walls. It reacted across the floors. It reacted on the doors. Blood evidence was detected throughout the space in a pattern that told investigators this was not a small incident. All of it, every trace that came back, was confirmed through DNA as belonging to George Cox Jr. Detective Kevin Callahan.
Good morning, sir.
Your Honor, I've been a police officer for nearly 30 years and have been strictly a missing persons detective for the last 15. I unfortunately have had other cases similar to the one that we're here on today. However, this is the very first time that I felt compelled to make a statement during this part of our justice system. I've been working on this case since the beginning of November of 2024 when the missing person report was initially made. Over that time, I've had the opportunity, although obviously at the worst of times, to get to know the family of George Cox Jr., particularly his father. With them, like so many other family members of missing people, the thought of not knowing where your family member is a heavy burden to carry, causing an indescribable amount of stress, anguish, and sadness that one cannot begin to understand unless going through it, including me. That is certainly the case here, and especially for his mother, who talked to George often, nearly every day. I have talked to both Mr. Cox and Ms. Calloway countless times over the past year and a half, and although I do believe they knew we were trying everything we could to find their son, I'm not sure I ever got off the phone with them thinking I did anything to ease their mind or obvious pain. That is and always will be the toughest part of my job. I will tell you this, Your Honor. One thing that I have learned over my many years of doing missing person investigations that end in homicide, there is one major difference between these cases and a homicide case with no missing person aspect. With the homicide investigation, for lack of a better description, there is closure for the family from the onset. They unfortunately know their loved one is deceased and can start the healing process right away, so to speak. With the missing person investigation that concludes in homicide, that is not the case. These families endure an additional time frame of pain and suffering, in this case 7 months, with just not knowing where their loved one is and always holding out hope, as they should, that their family member is at least alive. That's an additional 7 months of stress, sadness, pain, anxiety that the criminal justice system often overlooks, in my opinion. As always, it just didn't need to be this way. It could have been avoided had Diamond Vaden had an ounce of human decency. With Diamond Vaden, Your Honor, don't be fooled. She is well-spoken, polite, intelligent, and presents herself well. What you are looking at, Your Honor, is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Over my 30 years, Diamond can lie and manipulate like no one I have ever encountered. She will look you in the eye, knowingly lie, and be very believable all the same. It's a terrible talent she certainly possesses. While conducting this investigation and learning how she communicates and interacts with people before and certainly after her arrest, Diamond will manipulate, use, deceive anybody, including family, to get what she wants. She is the master manipulator. She has no limitations on her manipulation or deception to get what she wants. In short, everything about Diamond Vaden is centered around Diamond Vaden. On my third and final conversation with Diamond, I told her, other than telling me her name, everything she has told me has been a lie. No statement in this investigation is more true. I can say with certainty that Diamond Vaden has zero remorse. She does not have any resemblance of her moral compass. Why she is like this, I cannot say. I can say that it is not because of the way she was raised. By all accounts, her parents are good people, hardworking, ethical, and most importantly, caring. From doing missing person investigations, I've learned many things. But one thing that I've learned without question, that there is a lot of kids that have terrible parents and still manage to be good, productive people despite their parents. However, and equally true, there are a lot of good parents that have terrible children to no fault of their own. That latter is certainly the case here. Diamond gets and deserves full credit for the person she is. This crime was horrific, Your Honor. The attempt of cleaning up the crime scene told the story of the type of person we were dealing with. The blood, Your Honor, was everywhere. Walls, floors, doors, just everywhere. Killing anyone for any reason takes a special kind of person. To knowingly, willingly, and consciously dispose of a human being in the manner that was done in this case, as they say in poker, that is going all in on the self-centered and malicious person you are. In closing, I want to thank the court for this opportunity, as well as to Prosecutor Strang and Prosecutor McNair, the County Prosecutor's Office in general, for their dedication and hard work in getting justice the Cox family and society deserve.
Sitting right there in front of him. He said that every time he passes Sandusky now, every time he crosses that river, he has to think about his son. And that for 7 of those months, he had no idea his son was right there beside him. That image, a father driving over a river that holds his son 26 times, not knowing, is not something that can be adequately addressed in a courtroom. No sentence makes it smaller. No legal agreement accounts for it completely. It simply exists as one of the more quietly devastating details of an already devastating case. Now here is where the evidence begins to speak for itself. Investigators obtained Diamond Vaden's phone records and examined the activity from the night of October 19th into October 20th, 2024. Within that window of time, the same window during which George Cox Jr. lost his life inside that apartment, there was a Google search conducted from her phone. The search read, "What are the chances to survive in real life if you get stabbed in the abdomen multiple times?" That search was presented to the judge at the sentencing hearing. And when the judge later asked Diamond directly why she had not called for help, Why, when a man she claimed to care about was stabbed in front of her, she had not dialed 911. She said she panicked. She told the judge she did everything she could to try to save him. She searched Google. She did not call emergency services. She searched Google to find out whether a man with multiple stab wounds to the abdomen had a realistic chance of survival. That was the action she chose in those critical minutes. Not a phone call to 911, not an attempt to get George to a hospital. A Google search. And then, based on whatever conclusion she reached after that search, she made every decision that followed. She hog-tied him. She wrapped him in a fitted bedsheet. She secured it around his ankles with marine-style rope. She cleaned the apartment, or attempted to. She loaded his body and drove. For an hour and 15 minutes, she drove. And she stopped at the Huron River just south of the Route 2 bridge in Erie County, Ohio. And she threw him in. Then she went back to her life. She called his father and said she would never hurt George. She told police she had never been in his apartment. She denied everything to his brother for 11 minutes on a recorded phone call. And she kept going. 7 months passed. The family searched. The detective worked. George Sr. drove those 26 trips back and forth across a bridge with his son underneath it. And then, on May 16, 2025, 2 kayakers near the Huron River marsh came across something in the water just south of the Route 2 bridge in Erie County. They reported what they found.
That so far police have not been able to solve. A body washed up in a river, and police are telling us this does not look like an accident. But no one has come forward to ID the potential victim. But now a way the police believe you can help in making an ID. Catherine Huntley here now, live with this story.
Back on May 16th, a kayaker found a body in a Huron River marsh. That body remains unidentified. So now the sheriff's office is hoping the public will be able to identify some of the tattoos on that body. Take a good look. These are some possibly recognizable tattoos on the Erie County John Doe. Law enforcement is hoping someone might know who or what organizations they belong to.
Study the tattoos, talk to people, anybody that does tattoos or anybody that has knowledge of gangs within Toledo to Cleveland, give us a call. We'd be more than happy to listen to you.
Police say the man was 5 feet 6 inches tall, black.
DNA testing was conducted, and the results confirmed what George Sr. had feared every one of those 26 drives. The man in the river was George Cox, Jr. Once the identification was confirmed, George Sr. went to see his son. What he found when he arrived made a traditional burial impossible. The condition of George's remains after 7 months in that water was such that his father made the decision to have him cremated. He could not put him in the ground looking the way he looked. He said that in court, directly to the judge. He said he had to pre-make arrangements and that cremation was the only choice he felt he could make for his son. And then his 8-year-old granddaughter, George's daughter Gianna, asked him why he burned her dad. That question exists now. It will exist for a long time. The answer to it will have to come someday, in some form, and no version of that conversation is easy. Because the true answer to Gianna's question is not about cremation. It is about what Diamond Vaden chose to do with her father's body after she took his life, and that is a truth that an 8-year-old should never have to carry. Now, here is a detail that speaks to character in a way that no prosecutor could have scripted. On May 16, 2025, the same day that George Cox Jr.'s body was discovered in the Huron River, the same day that investigators were in the process of confirming his identity, Diamond Vaden sent a text message to Emmanuel McQueen Jr. during an argument between them. The message read, "You going to be missing next." Prosecutors presented that message at sentencing as evidence of the kind of person the court was dealing with. Her defense attorney pushed back on it, arguing that the message was one line taken out of a much larger conversation, and that without the full context of the exchange, no one could responsibly attribute specific meaning to it. Diamond herself told the judge the message was about an argument, and that she was checking on McQueen's welfare. The judge acknowledged it and moved forward. Whether that message means what prosecutors suggested it means, or whether it means something more ordinary, is for the court and the public to weigh. What is documented is that on the same day the world was beginning to learn that a man named George Cox, Jr. had been found in a river wrapped in a sheet. Diamond Vaden sent those words to another man. Diamond Vaden was arrested on July 21, 2025. Officers found her at Emmanuel McQueen Jr.'s home. A plea agreement was reached that carried a sentencing range of 14 to 20 years. And the case moved to the hearing where George Sr., Chaplain Candace Amos, and Detective Kevin Callahan would all stand before a judge and say what they needed to say. Detective Callahan's statement to the court deserves its own attention because it was not the kind of thing that happens every day. This was a man with nearly 3 decades in law enforcement who had worked alongside grieving families in missing persons cases throughout his entire career. He had made countless phone calls to parents and spouses and siblings, delivering the kind of news that changes everything. He had sat with the Cox family through 7 months of not knowing, through the discovery, through the identification, through everything that followed. And he had never, in 30 years, felt the need to speak at a sentencing hearing. Not once, until this case. He told the judge that Diamond Vaden was well-spoken, polite, intelligent, and presented herself well. He said these things not as compliments, but as warnings. His exact words were that the court was looking at a wolf in sheep's clothing. He described her as someone who could look a person directly in the eyes, knowingly deliver a lie, and be completely convincing while doing so. He called it a terrible talent. He said that over the course of the investigation, he had observed the way she communicated and the way she interacted with people, both before and after her arrest, and that in his assessment she would manipulate, use, and deceive anyone, including family, to get what she wanted. He said she had no limitations on her deception. He told the judge that in his third and final conversation with Diamond, he informed her that other than telling him her name, everything she had said to him had been a lie. He said no statement from the entire investigation was more accurate than that one. He also said he could state with certainty that she had zero remorse. He noted that her parents, by all accounts, were good people. Hard-working, ethical, caring. He was deliberate about including that detail because he did not want the court to misattribute her character to her upbringing. Some people, he said, have terrible parents and still manage to become good, productive human beings. And some good parents raise children who become something their parents never could have anticipated and never would have chosen. That, in his view, was the situation here. Diamond Vaden, he concluded, was entirely responsible for the person she had chosen to become. He also spoke about the crime scene itself. The blood was not in one place. It was not contained. It was on the walls, on the floors, on the doors, everywhere. He told the judge that the attempt to clean that scene, to scrub away what had happened in that apartment, was itself revealing. It told the story of a person who understood exactly what they had done and was willing to do whatever it took to make sure nobody else found out. The defense attorney, Deanna Robertson, spoke before her client addressed the court. She extended sincere condolences to the Cox family. She acknowledged their pain. She did not minimize what had happened. She described Diamond as someone who had gotten into a terrible situation and then made it worse with every subsequent decision. She also noted that Diamond's own family was present in that courtroom, that they were good people who had not enabled anything their daughter had done. And then Diamond Vaden prepared to speak for herself. Before we get to that, and there is more to this story, more from that courtroom, more from the judge, more from the sentencing itself, if you have been watching this far, you already know that this case is not a simple one. It is a case built on betrayal, on a family that refused to stop searching, on a detective who spent 30 years waiting for a case that would finally make him speak, and on a man named June who made pancakes from scratch one Christmas morning and never wanted to use a box again. When Diamond Vaden finally stood up to speak in that courtroom, the room already knew what the evidence had shown. The family had spoken. The detective had spoken. The prosecutor had laid out what the phone records revealed, what the luminol confirmed, and what 7 months of silence had cost the people sitting in those seats. All of that was already on the record before she opened her mouth, and then she spoke. She began by saying it was unfortunate that 2 families were present that day. She spoke about walking away from violence in the past. She said she was not raised in a household where men put their hands on women. She said there had been many times she had to walk away from situations rather than being the one who left. And then she said she regretted every day that she was not able to help George, that she was not able to call the police because she panicked. She said it was a lot. She said it was just a lot for her to deal with, and she said she was truly very sorry. She also said something else. She told the judge that she believed God brought her to that moment to keep her safe, that she was not safe with George, that she was not stable in that relationship and was not safe in the community. Those were her words delivered in open court at the sentencing of a man whose family was sitting in the same room. No documentation, no prior police reports, and no corroborating evidence supporting those claims was introduced into the court record at any point during the sentencing hearing. The judge listened to all of it, and then he started asking questions. He did not accept the statement at face value. He did not move past the details the way someone might have hoped. He asked her about George Cox Sr., about the conversation where she had called him Dad and told him she would never do anything to hurt his son. She pushed back on it. She told the judge she only called George Sr. Dad out of respect because she was in his son's home and did not feel right calling him by his first name. She said they never really had a relationship. She said she did whatever George wanted her to do. The judge pressed her. He asked whether George Sr. had asked her where his son was. She acknowledged he had. He asked her directly. Did she lie to him? She paused. Then she confirmed that what George Sr. had said earlier in that courtroom was true. The judge then asked her how many times she had told members of George's family that she did not know where he was or what had happened to him. She said twice. He asked who those family members were. She named his father and his aunt. He asked her what she had said to each of them. The answer was the same both times. She told them she did not know. She said she did not know twice, while knowing exactly where George's body was. The judge then brought the conversation back to the most basic question in the entire case. He asked her what happened to George. She said George died. The judge pushed further. He asked how George died, and she answered him. She said he was beat up and he was stabbed by her. That admission, delivered in open court in her own voice, is the clearest moment of factual clarity in everything she said that day. Whatever else surrounded that statement, the explanations, the framing, the context she offered, the core fact came from her own mouth in front of a judge, in front of the family, on the record. The judge then asked about the Google search. He asked whether she had conducted the search about surviving stab wounds to the abdomen. She confirmed she had. He then asked whether George was still alive after she had stabbed him, whether he was conscious, whether he was bleeding. The record reflects that she confirmed he was, which means she had a window, a real, documented window of time during which a phone call to 911 could have been made. during which emergency services could have responded, during which George Cox Jr. might have had a chance. She searched Google instead. The judge asked whether George was able to get to a phone during that time. She said he was not. He asked why. She told the judge that George was in shock, that he kept falling, and that she was trying to stop him from moving so she could help him. The judge asked whether George wanted to leave. She said no. He asked whether George asked her to call for help. She said he told her to save him, to try to save him. The judge's response to that was direct. He told her in plain language that she would rather have watched him die than get help. He pointed to the Google search again. A search not about how to help someone survive, but about how long it takes someone to die after being stabbed in the abdomen multiple times. She said she panicked. The judge said the word back to her. Panic. And then there was a silence in that courtroom that the transcript cannot fully convey, but anyone who has read the record understands what it represented. She told the judge she did everything she could to try to save George, that she just did not call the police, and that she regretted it. Then the judge asked how she moved the body. This is where the account she gave shifted in a way that became significant. She told the judge she left the scene. She said people she knew came to the apartment. She said she told them she could not be there, and she said they got rid of him. She then added that these people threatened her, that they told her not to say anything to police, or they would confine her and her family. The judge noted the tension in that account immediately. He pointed out that these were people she was close enough to, people she trusted enough to call in that moment. She acknowledged they were people she trusted. He confirmed that the information she was providing about these individuals had already been shared with the state. Two names came up during that exchange in open court: William Rogers and Donald Humphrey. The full picture of what each person did and what role they played was not completely established on the record at sentencing, in part because no pre-sentence investigation report had been prepared. The judge acknowledged that directly. He noted that the court was working with limited information as a result, and that the absence of that report created gaps he would ordinarily have filled before reaching a sentencing decision. What the judge did confirm on the record, not from Diamond, but from the judge himself, was that Emmanuel McQueen had helped dispose of George's body. McQueen had already been arrested at the same residence where Diamond was found on July 21st, 2025, initially on a weapons charge. The judge's statement in open court confirmed that his involvement in this case went beyond that charge. The judge also asked about the sheet. He noted that a sheet from the residence had been used. Diamond corrected him. She said it was not her residence, it was George's apartment. She said the sheet came from the floor of the bedroom. He asked about the rope. She said she had already left the scene by the time the rope was involved and did not know where it came from. The judge asked whether she knew they were going to use the sheet. She said she did not know what they were going to do. She only knew she had a situation she could not manage, and she panicked and left. He asked if she went back afterward to clean the apartment. She said no. She said she never went back. That account stands against the luminol results, the forensic evidence, and the boots found at her residence that she initially told police were not hers. The same boots later confirmed to belong to George. The court had all of that on the record before she spoke a single word. Before the judge delivered his sentence, 4 members of George's family addressed the court. His mother, Sonia Calloway, spoke. His aunts, Lynette Ford and Chaplain Candace Amos, both took the stand, and George Cox Sr., who had already delivered his impact statement, had made the room understand what 26 drives and 7 months of not knowing actually felt like from the inside. These were not abstract statements of loss. These were specific, personal, documented accounts of what one family carried while the woman sitting in front of them continued to say she did not know anything. Now, it is important to understand exactly what was legally on the table when the judge reached his decision, because the gap between what happened to George Cox Jr. and what the law could formally hold Diamond Vaden accountable for is something the family addressed directly and something the record reflects honestly. Diamond Vaden had originally been charged with murder. As part of a plea agreement negotiated between the defense and the prosecution, that charge was amended to involuntary manslaughter, a first-degree felony under Ohio law. She also faced a felonious assault charge and a separate charge related to the handling and disposal of George's body. The agreed sentencing range between the state and the defense was 14 to 20 years on the minimum side before any additional time applied under Ohio law. The reason the original murder charge did not proceed to trial comes down to a hard legal reality that the case record reflects. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy ruled the cause and manner of George's death as undetermined. After 7 months in that river, in the condition his body was found, a formal determination of cause of death could not be made to the standard required for a murder conviction. The examiner noted that the circumstances of the disposal indicated a non-natural cause of death and that the investigation pointed to violence, but without a formal ruling, the prosecution was working within the boundaries of what the evidence could conclusively establish in a courtroom. That is the legal framework that produced the plea. It is not a reflection of what the family believes happened or what the evidence as a whole strongly suggests. It is the reality of what the law can formally sustain when a body spends 7 months in a river. George Sr. acknowledged that in his statement to the judge. He said he understood what the agreement was and what the court was bound by. He said he understood the law, but he also said something else. He said that if she had stabbed George in a fight and called 911 and his son had died, they would be having a very different conversation. Instead, they were there because his son's body was so decomposed that the family could not give him a traditional burial. He could not put him in the ground. They had to cremate him. And that choice, forced on them not by illness or accident, but by what Demon did after George stopped breathing, is something no legal agreement can fully address. Detective Callahan made a specific request to the judge before sentencing. He said that if the maximum sentence was not the court's decision, he asked the judge to at least remember those 7 months, the months the Cox family spent without answers, crossing bridges without knowing, hoping without confirmation, and to add that time to whatever sentence he chose. He made that request as a man who had spent 15 years working cases exactly like this one, and who had watched families carry that particular kind of pain more times than most people can imagine. The judge sentenced Diamond Vaden to the maximum the plea agreement permitted. On the involuntary manslaughter charge, she received 11 years, the maximum available on that count. The felonious assault charge added 8 years on top of that. The charge connected to the disposal of George's body added 7 months. Each sentence runs consecutively. That means the minimum total she will serve is 19 years and 7 months. Ohio's Reagan-Tokes law adds another dimension. It provides for an indefinite additional period of up to 5.5 years beyond the minimum, which means the maximum Diamond Vaden could serve is 25 years and 2 months. Whether she serves closer to the minimum or the maximum depends entirely on how she conducts herself during incarceration. The Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction will assess her over time, and that assessment will determine where in that range she ultimately lands. She received credit for 234 days she had already served. Court costs and fees were waived. That is the legal outcome. Those are the numbers. 19 years and 7 months at minimum. 25 years and 2 months at maximum, and at the end of either of those periods, George Cox Jr. will still be gone. Gianna will be a grown woman. George Sr. will be older. The river will still be there, just south of the Route 2 bridge in Erie County, holding a memory that will not wash away no matter how much time passes. There is one more thing worth saying clearly before this part of the story closes. Diamond Vaden's defense attorney made an argument in that courtroom that deserves to be acknowledged honestly, because it was made in good faith and it reflects a real dimension of how the law is supposed to work. She argued that her client was not a monster, that people in terrible situations make bad decisions, and that those decisions, however catastrophic, do not erase every other part of who a person is. She pointed out that none of us can know with certainty what we would do in a moment of genuine crisis. that the gap between who we believe we are and who we become under extreme pressure is something the legal system has to account for. She described her client as someone who got into a horrible situation and then made every subsequent decision wrong. Those arguments exist in the record. They were heard, and the judge sentenced Diamond to the maximum the agreement allowed, because the other side of that argument is also in the record. The Google search is in the record. The boots found at her residence are in the record. The statement she made to George's father is in the record. The recorded phone call with Jamari is in the record. The text message sent on the same day the body was discovered is in the record. The luminol results from the Bosworth Avenue apartment are in the record. The 7 months of silence are in the record. And the body of a 32-year-old man found wrapped in a sheet with rope around his ankles in a river 7 months after he disappeared is in the record. Detective Callahan said it plainly in his statement to the court. This did not have to happen this way. Not the death. That is a separate question with incomplete answers given what the record can formally establish. But the 7 months, the 26 drives, the boots, the denial, the recorded call, the text message, the Google search, none of that had to happen. Every single one of those choices was made after the moment in that apartment. Every single one of them added to what the Cox family was forced to carry. And every single one of them was a choice. George Cox Jr. was 32 years old. He had a daughter named Gianna who was 8 years old when she lost him. 8 years old when she asked her grandfather why her dad had been cremated, a question that will follow that family for the rest of their lives. He had a father who made 26 drives between Michigan and Cleveland without ever giving up, who crossed a river 52 times not knowing his son was beneath him, and who walked into that courtroom and told the truth about every part of it. He had a mother who spoke to him nearly every day. He had a brother who recorded a phone call trying to find him. He had an aunt who remembered a Christmas morning, and a boy who made pancakes from scratch and was proud of what he had created. He was June. He was the Pancake King. He was a son, a father, a brother, a nephew, a friend. And he deserved more than what he got. To the Cox family, to George Sr., to Sonia, to Jamari, to Chaplain Candace Amos, to Lynette Ford, and most of all to little Gianna, this channel sees you. This case was covered so that George Cox Jr. is never just a case number, so that people who never knew him understand who he was before they learn how he died, so that the 26 drives are not forgotten, so that the river means something to people who were never anywhere near it. Rest easy, June. If this story stayed with you, and based on everything it contains it should, make sure you're subscribed to Brian Crime TV so you never miss a case like this one. Every story on this channel is covered the same way this one was, with respect for the victim, honesty about the facts, and a commitment to making sure the people we lose in cases like this are remembered as human beings first. Hit the subscribe button right now if you are not already part of this community, and like this video if George Cox Jr.'s story deserved to be told. Because it did. See you on the next one.